Hello, everyone. It's so nice to speak with you. What a privilege it is to be here today. You always know me as the back of the stage house, the person who sends the emails, coordinates the event, and very rarely do I get to be the one giving a talk. So squeezing it in, super excited to share this with you because one of the passions that I have is public speaking, even though I may not do it as often as I would like to. So my name is Kelly Thibault, and I'm very excited to be here today. I want to talk about how we can use public speaking to elevate your career. I know a lot of folks are job searching right now, so it's really important that you build on that brand and you figure out how can you differentiate yourself from the thousands of other candidates that are out there. I'm currently the executive director for Secure Diversity, which also means I do all things day of security, and I volunteer in capacity as the San Francisco chapter head for Out in Tech, which means I lead the leadership team for the regional chapter of Out in Tech. And so I really love doing that, and that's a big part of who I am too. All right, so who am I? Like I said, I'm Kelly. I spent the first 10 years of my career in higher education administration. I did a lot of risk management. I did some functional IT. Basically, I'm the person who wears the hat and says, what's broken? How can we fix it? What do I need to learn to make it happen? And then, okay, now I'll teach you. So been through all that. I did learning and development in tech. That was when I transitioned. I thought that because I came from education, I had to go into learning. And I supported engineering product design. Real story, my favorite part of that job was that I taught myself coding to connect better with the engineers. I've been with Secure Diversity and Day of Security since January 2021 when we took this in-person event to a virtual event to deal with the demands of everybody being at home. I love public speaking. I'm an insatiable learner, if you didn't pick that up. And I live in the San Francisco East Bay with my wife, Michelle, who's a middle school teacher, and our dog, Darwin. So why do I want to talk about this? Well, kind of what's funny is when I think back, my mom loves to tell the story of when I was a toddler. My family went to church and I did not like to be in the front of the stage. I actually would run and hide behind the pulpit when they brought all the little toddlers up on stage. And then as I got older, I sang in the choir and I worked in the stage crew, but I was never front and center. I wasn't the soloist. I wasn't on the small group singing. I wasn't your Glee Club member. I was in the big choir and I didn't do the acting. I did the stage crew, lights, etc. Pretty much anything behind the house, I did it. I realized later that I love public speaking and storytelling. Some of that comes with self-confidence as well and the ability to get up on stage in front of people and not obsess over every little thing or worry that people are judging you. Whoops. So I wanted to share some stats. First of all, did you know that 75% of people are nervous or have a fear of public speaking? And I think that's a really high statistic because we do worry about what are people going to think about us? What if I'm not perfect at this? What if I say ums, uhs, I have verbal fillers, pauses, etc. The thing is that we really can move through that. And a lot of those, if you're nervous about those things, you can work on them to make them better. And if you look at it even further, if we dive into gender data, unfortunately, they don't provide data on non-binary folks or transgender individuals. Just 44% of women and 37% of men have this fear. So actually, women are impacted higher, which is not really surprising because we're given certain messages about how we need to show up, behave, and take a back seat our whole lives. But here's the thing, we can do this. We can overcome our fears. We can improve. And a lot of times it really just comes down to saying, I'm going to do it and I'm going to accept that I am imperfect and I'm going to continue talking through this. And I included a GIF here, or GIF, however you prefer to pronounce it, and about using those in the right time, in the right moment. Okay. So why do you want to public speak? Well, first of all, let's talk about starting small. It's really good. If you haven't done it, start small, get bigger. Conference presentations are great. So Day of Security, one of the things that I love is, okay, sorry, I saw I was frozen. I'm good. Okay. One of the things I love about Day of Security is that we take speakers who haven't spoken before. We actually make a concerted effort to include people who have not spoken before. But conference presentations are great because as a conference, we're sharing about that you're talking. You get to share that you're talking. It really elevates your brand and it can help make you stand out at work, because getting to talk at a conference usually involves a CFP. It involves somebody selecting the topic and you just present on that topic. So it's kind of a big deal. A smaller way is you can do work presentations. You can lead a retro. You can lead a SEV incident response. You can do some training or onboarding. When I was in learning and development, I taught myself a lot about engineering, product, and design, but I wasn't working on those teams. So I often brought in subject matter experts or folks from those teams to give a talk. I brought in someone from design to talk about with engineers about the tooling that they used so that the engineers could better understand how to provide what the design team needed, or why the design team was providing to engineering what they were. And that could have been anybody on the team who worked with that tool. All hands are also a great place. When I was supporting, I was also on our Women at team when I was in L&D, and I spoke at an all hands for the whole company. I was used to speaking at End All Hands, but I got up there and I started shaking, and I was so embarrassed that I said into the mic, like, oh, I didn't think I'd be nervous, but wow, this is really scary. And then I was horrified that I told the whole company that I was nervous. But, it happens. And then you can lead meetings. Obviously, especially if you're in leadership, you're doing that, but ask your manager to lead a meeting. That's public speaking. It's pulling people together. And then, of course, another public speaking is pitches. If you're thinking about starting a company, raising funds, like this is really important to work on in terms of making sure that you are comfortable going into that room. And you're never going to be, I say comfortable enough that you can push aside how you feel in the struggle that you're facing. All right, so tips for success: tell stories. People love to connect with you. That's why you've heard that I've told stories throughout this, right? Like getting up and talking in front of an all hands. The child at church, those sorts of things. So they help people connect to be like, oh yeah, I've been there. I know that. I had that embarrassing moment. Share data. We all have great experiences, but people love to see research. I'm a bit of an academic nerd, so you will find that when I give presentations, I usually provide data and I provide my sources. So that's really important too. Use visual aids. If you're like me, I'm a visual and kinesthetic learner. I don't do well with audio learning. So if you talk to me with no visual aids, chances of me retaining what you said are very low. Engage your audience. I'm not doing that as well on this platform just because there is a delay between what I say and when you hear it. There's like 10 to 20 seconds of when I'm saying it and then when those of you listening are hearing it. So if I did something like a Kahoot, it gets really complicated because of that delay. So but if you're not on Hopin with that delay, then something like a Kahoot, a Slido, Mentimeter, those are really fun. And they let people engage anonymously as well, like sharing feedback, doing graphs, voting, etc. And you don't have to take yourself off of mute. If you're in a meeting, you don't have to take yourself off of mute. That's uncomfortable for some people. So meeting people where they are. And then graphics are great. Make them fun. Make sure you use them legally and use GIFs sparingly. And I say that because that constant movement can be really distracting, especially if you're someone who gets distracted easily. So you're trying to listen to the speaker and you have this movement over here like this, right? And so use those sparingly, use them on a slide you're not going to stay on for very long. And then cater to your audience. So if I'm speaking to a general audience, I'm going to keep things more high level, right? If I'm speaking to a board, let's say I'm coming in, I'm not a CISO, but let's say I'm a CISO coming into the board, I am not going to go nitty gritty with cybersecurity technology talk, right? I'm going to give it on the level that the board can understand it, and I'm going to assume that they don't understand much of engineering because some of them may never have been in a technical role. Doesn't mean you can't run a company if you've never done the technical side. So you want to assume that they haven't. And if someone has a more technical question, they'll follow up. Now, if you're meeting with a team who you know has that knowledge, then absolutely speak their language. Like I said, know your audience. It also impacts how you share the data. Pay attention to what do you think people are interested in and how can you connect that to what you're saying. And then what does your audience want to hear? What's important to them? So I like to think about who am I talking to in terms of like, if I'm talking to my boss, what does my boss want to hear? Versus if I'm talking to a colleague, what do they want to hear? If I'm trying to start a company and I'm pitching to a VC, how I pitch to them is different than how I'm going to pitch to, let's say, a customer that I'm trying to bring onto my new company. So I'm asking both of them for money, but what I'm going to say and how I present it is very different because they're interested in different things. And what I think is super important and fascinating may not be as important to the person I'm speaking to. So if we use the VC example, like I care a lot about my passion, the history, etc. They want to know, is your product or service viable? How do you plan to make money? How do you plan to scale, etc. All right, so let's talk about resources. First of all, you can practice with your colleagues. You can use your learning and development partner if you have them. When I was in L&D, I was begging people to work with me. I said I wanted them to, I was happy to review their presentations. I was happy to do a practice round with them. Now, it depends how busy your teams are and what they're working on. But for me, I had time and capacity to do that. If someone had reached out and said like, hey, I'm speaking for the first time, do you mind running through this with me and giving me feedback? I would have been more than happy to do that. Your colleagues will also probably, if they can find time, do that. The other thing is utilize people around you. Let's say you want to give a talk, but you're like, I just don't know what to speak on, but I know this is really important for me and I want to do it. Ask someone, like, say, can we throw some ideas around? Can we brainstorm? Can we just do, like, I used to do whiteboarding sessions and I just write everything down and then I try to theme everything. So qualitative research right there too. Taking what I've heard, what people have been talking about, and then figure out where those themes are. And then maybe that's something I want to talk about. And that is it. So that's the bulk of my presentation. Feel free to contact me. Those are my info. My website's a little, I need to update it some, but that's a little out of date. And then of course I have my data here, my research. I will post this in the Slack, but now I have time for questions and happy to answer any of that for you. I see Luce said, same, let's go visual learners. You know, I think we underrate the value of visual support in that when you give a slide, I do want to share this, is you give a slide of have a visual, have a few bullet points, but your whole presentation shouldn't be on the slide. That's really disengaging and hard to follow. And then, but at the same time, like, please have some bullet points. I've seen people where they just put up one, they put just like an image. And that's helpful if it's like a short GIF and you're just going to say a couple things, but then that doesn't help me to follow what you're talking about either. So really playing into those learning needs. I know it's harder, like I talked about kinesthetic learning, which is hands-on learning. That's really great if you're giving a presentation that's not as easy to do, but that is where the surveys or the questions or the gamification can be really, really helpful. And sure, do you guys see still nervous before going on stage? I don't think any of us ever get unnervous. I mean, maybe people who are used to it all the time, but even, public officials, they still get nervous. I think about, okay, so I like romantic comedy movies. They're cheesy, but I think about, I think it was Made in Manhattan with Jennifer Lopez, and one of the actors in there, the character said he carried like a paperclip or something, because even though he was a politician, he still got nervous. And so he had to have something to be like, okay, calm your nerves. Any questions from folks? Anything I can share or talk about? I kept my presentation short. Apparently it was a little too short, but that's okay. Amy, I never get unnervous. I know. I don't think that's a word. You'll bear with me. This is public speaking, right? Where you get used to it and you just have to accept sometimes you say things that you're like, why did I say that? And you got roll with it. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I went through that super fast. I've done this before and I had a Kahoot in it, so it came out a little bit shorter because I took that element out. Apologies that I did this too quickly, but you still have time. You still have 10 more minutes to go find another talk and go check out the end of someone else's talk because they're amazing. And I'm super excited. And I hope you all have a great rest of the day. And that if I get to meet you tomorrow, if you're joining us in person, and if not, that you will live stream the event tomorrow too, because we have some amazing speakers there too. Sorry you missed it, Dima. It was super quick today, and it will be on the recording in the replays later. Have a great day, everyone, and enjoy the rest of the conference.